Next, normally we'd go ahead and write our deploy script, but let's actually get used to writing some tests. And we're going to refactor these tests a couple of times. So stay with me here. You ready? All right, let's write our first test. Now, like I said, tests are absolutely critical for our smart contract development journey. And if you try to deploy your smart contracts without tests or go to a smart contract auditor without tests, they're going to turn you away. You absolutely are not writing mature code if you're not doing tests. And writing badass tests separates a lot of the mediocre devs between the really good devs. So let's write some badass tests. For now, we're just going to go ahead and we'll create a new file. We'll call it fundmetest.t.sol. This .t.sol is just a convention in Solidity for saying, hey, this is a test file. So fundmetest.t.sol. And we're going to write our tests in here in Solidity, exactly as we would write any other Solidity contract. So we're going to get this started the exact same way we get anything else started. So we'll do spdx license identifier MIT. My GitHub Copilot automatically recommended that. So I just went ahead and hit tab, Pragma Solidity, GitHub Copilot again, give me some decent recommendations. And then we can say contract fund me test. Now, the Forge standard library has a couple of standard packages or standard contracts that we can import to make running our tests easier. That assert command, for example, is something that Foundry automatically has built in. So for now, we'll do import test from std/test.sol. And we'll say fundmetest is test. So we're going to inherit everything from this test contract. And if you command click into here, you'll see this abstract contract test is a whole bunch of other stuff. And these are all different contracts that help us write our tests. So what's the first thing that we should do when we write our tests? Well, we want to test that our fundme contract is doing what we want it to do. So one of the first things that we're going to have to do is actually deploy that contract. Now, pretty soon, we're going to learn how we can actually import our deploy scripts in here to make our deployment environment the exact same as our testing environment. But for now, we're going to just deploy our contracts right in this test folder. So we're going to say function setup external like this. And on all of our tests, the first thing that happens is this setup function. And in here is where we're going to actually deploy our contract. Now, I do want to show you something though. Here's what one of our tests is going to look like. We're going to say function test demo. And we'll make this public. I'm doing this just to have a demo test. If this is your entire test file and you pull up our terminal and we run forge test, you'll see it'll run this and everything will pass. Oh, I should spell external right. Now if we run this, we'll see compiler run successful and we'll see test demo went ahead and passed here. However, setup always runs first. For example, if we have uint 256 number equals 1 and then setup, we say number equals 2, and then we run test demo where we say assert equals number in 2, clear, and run our test. We'll see this indeed does pass. So we first run our setup function and then we run our tests. Another way to actually test this and actually do some debugging is using something called console.log. So if you command or control click or just command P to test.sol, this test.sol is a huge file. And another library that it comes packed with is this thing called the console. If you go to the Forge documentation, it talks about this thing called console logging. And we can actually do print statements that will print stuff out from our tests and from our smart contracts. So if I import this console into here, and then I do function test demo public, and I do console.log number, I should get printed out to our terminal the number associated with number, which should be 2. I can also do something like console.log hello with an exclamation mark. Now if I pull up the terminal, let's clear what we have so far, and we run forge test-vv, this -vv specifies the visibility of logging in this test. We can have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. We're just going to go with 2 right now. We should see those 2 logs output, and we do indeed. We see a new section of our output here where we have logs, and we see 2 and hello. We minimize our terminal. We change this to hi mom. Pull up the terminal, run it again with the -vv. We now indeed see 2 and hi mom. And this can be an easy way for us to start debugging, but it's something I wanted to show you just to show you again, hey, this runs first and then this runs. We're going to leave console in here for now because you're likely going to want to use it later when you run into issues and when you start debugging yourself. All right, great. So now we know how to write a basic test and how the test actually gets set up, and we know a little bit about console logging. Let's go ahead and let's deploy our contract in this setup function. So in order to deploy it, we're going to have to obviously have this contract know about it. So we're going to say import fundme from, we're going to go down a directory. So we're going to go, so the 2 dots stands for going down a directory because this is in fundme. So we go down to this overall file, and then we're going to go /src/fundme.sol, and GitHub Copilot and VS Code are actually even helping me out a little bit there. And now that we have our fundme, we can actually deploy this in our setup. And then actually let's get rid of these lines because we don't need them anymore. So in our setup now, we're going to say fundme, right? And so this has a capital F, this has a lowercase f. These are slightly different. Equals new fundme. Fundme equals new fundme, right? A little confusing, but we're saying our fundme variable of type fundme is going to be a new fundme contract. And if we go to our fundme, we go to the constructor here, we can see that it doesn't take any input parameters, so we can actually just go ahead and deploy this as we see fit. Those of you watching though know that this address here only works for Sepolia, and we'll see how we can work with this in a little bit. But we've actually deployed our fundme contract like this. Now in our demo, we can test this fundme contract, and we could pick a function or a public variable to check to see if what we're working with is good. So for example, since minimum USD is a public variable, we could check to see if the minimum USD is indeed 5 or 5 times 10 raised to the 18, or just, 5e18. So what we could do in our test demo, we could change the name of this to test minimum dollar is 5. I like to make my test names very verbose to explain exactly what they're going to be doing. But in this function here, we would then call this minimum USD function and make sure that it's equal to 5 or 5e18. In order to call this, we need access to this fundme. And since it's scoped in this setup, let's go ahead and make it a storage or state variable by putting it up here and initializing it in the setup. So now that we've scoped it in this entire contract, we can now do fundme.minimumUSD. And this test contract gives us access to this assert equal function, and we can just wrap our whole test up like this. So now that we have this, we can pull our terminal back up and run forge test. And fantastic, we see compiler run successful. Test minimum dollar is 5 is now passing. Great. If we change this to 6, we should see that actually fail. So running forge test now, we'll see that it indeed failed because the starting minimum USD is 5, and we're trying to check to see if it's 6. So let's change this back to 5, clear the terminal, rerun the terminal, and boom, compiler run successful. Awesome, you just run your first basic test. Great job. When you're working with systems where you don't have to work with any external contracts, just continuing to write your tests like this is a great practice. And with the advent of AI, we can go even further with this.